All right, Nate, what you got?
It's just it's cool that these albums came out at the age that we were in the history that was happening at the time of, technological advancement simultaneously with us being early in high school, with music still being tangible to CDs, in tandem with being young and impressionable. It's just like we kind of have like a pretty sweet life in terms of music. I think that's why we created this podcast, because a lot of this
Definitely.
music that's timeless would only work with our generation, or if you were born in like the late 60s and like came up with like the Beatles and Zeppelin and stuff. There's a little middle era there that you might have got tail ends of either or, like 80s with U2 and stuff. But yeah, we're lucky because we got to come up when a lot of this stuff was just getting started. So Eminem will go down. You look up like the most iconic artists of all time. Eminem's in there. Radiohead's in there. This next band's not in there. I wouldn't
It is
say
for us, though. It is for us.
Yeah.
it is for us, and anyone that appreciates music on a very deep level, I think, can agree that this band is influential or a staple for heavy music, rock music, metal music. They really don't have a genre. We always try to identify what is this band, what category do we put them on the library shelf, and I don't really know because Deftones is the band we're going to talk about here. Referenced them quite a bit. Hung out with a few of the guys a few times, and this album, White Pony, came out on June 20th, 2000. So we literally were like, summer break was just starting. So talk about like time and place, like boom, out of high school. This heavy album that this band that I already like really loved with Around the Fur, which we referenced as my favorite Deftones album, and so I was super stoked on this album to drop. And again, actually kind of goes in tandem with Tone's selection with Radiohead, OK Computer, or sorry, what was it, Tone?
Kid A.
Yeah, Kid A.
Kid A,
Yep.
Kid A, yeah, because it's a complete shift in soundscape and writing ability and promotion and I mean just everything. So White Pony was dropped, and yeah, it's just a huge crazy shift for the band. Frank Delgado, he's a DJ for the band. He worked with them on Adrenaline and Around the Fur, but this is the first album where he was kind of introduced as a full-time member. So I remember opening up the booklet and seeing all members in there and being like, oh, who's this new guy? He's the DJ. And this is kind of the era of music where DJs were starting to be implemented into band lineups. So like Limp Bizkit, Crazy Town, Deftones. I feel like every new metal band had a DJ. It was just like the thing.
Incubus,
It seemed
you say
normal.
that? Incubus?
Yeah, Incubus. Yep. Yeah, it seemed normal to see a band on YouTube and a DJ in the background. It's like, oh yeah, it's normal now to see a DJ as part of a rock band or any kind of like, regular instrument. But yeah, I was huge into Deftones and Around the Fur, and mainly through Napster actually. So I got into them through Napster and had songs from the first record, Adrenaline, like Engine Number 9 and stuff. So when I was kind of a fan leading up to this, I was pleasantly surprised, but also kind of like unsure, similar to some fans of the Radiohead on the Kid A from OK Computer. Like this is not as heavy as Adrenaline Around the Fur. This is, if anything, I don't know. It's like I wasn't a hardcore fan enough to be like this is radio friendly, but it seemed like a shift.
It was way more melodic.
Way more.
Yeah.
Which is like a tribute to them as a band. Like they
Totally.
okay, we're a heavy band, but here we can actually do this too.
Mm-hmm.
And you did see elements of that on Around the Fur with Be Quiet and Drive. Like you knew they could do it, but this was way more polished too.
Yeah.
Way more polished.
Yeah, no, and that's a really good point because there are some songs on Around the Fur that like allude to it, but it was so like sprinkled in, it just didn't seem like it was a main kind of I don't know, element to their band. But yeah, experimental, new wave. Chino's a big fan of that scene. Clearly, he came up in the '80s, so he's a big fan of like The Cure and bands like that. So he started playing guitar on this album for the first time. So it wasn't just Stephen Carpenter; it was now two guitarists, which makes the album a little bit louder and coming from two different angles. So if you listen to it in the headphones, there's a lot more guitar coming through.
Deftones,
yeah. Yeah, shout out to Steph. Yeah, and so they recorded the album in West Hollywood, which I'm up there quite a bit, and Sausalito, which is across the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. place that me and my wife love. It reminds me of Maine a lot, only because of the harbor and so forth. But there's a vibe there, and there's a vibe in West Hollywood. So I feel like that those definitely had some, some influence on the album production and sound to an extent, just because when you see landscapes like that, you're just engulfed in it. But yeah, I mean, the album climbed the charts pretty quickly. It actually is their only album that went platinum. It went platinum in 2002. So for a band like Deftones, and yeah, they're not in the Rolling Stone Top 100 or whatever, but they are a platinum selling album band. Sorry, with that album coming from like essentially a metal band. That's something to say. It's not hard to sell that many records as that kind of band. But yeah, it's a kind of testament to Terry Date to an extent. He's the producer. He produced bands like Soundgarden, Fishbone, Pantera, Mother Love Bone from the grunge era, and so forth. But I don't know. I think what I started to realize as I listened to this album more, that it's more of a storytelling album. There's more like, things that I love about Pearl Jam. Like, oh, I can see this picture that's being painted for me, and it's no longer like, I don't know, something difficult to figure out. It's just like it's all out there, and I can just like either identify it or with it or not. But it's all there in front of me, and I can gravitate towards it and really put it's almost like a movie soundtrack to an extent. You can really kind of put some scenery to the songs.
What tracks stick out to you, Nate?
Oh man, it's a front to back album. But
yeah, there isn't a bad one, but like if you had to, like, for me, it's like I love Passenger with Maynard.
Oh yeah.
I mean, talk about bringing melody into your album. Here's
Totally.
Maynard, who can totally pull that off. So that's a fun kind of back and forth between Chino and Maynard and the music.
Maynard from Tool, yep, and a Perfect Circle that you referenced in a recent Instagram post.
Yep.
That song's that I actually put down Knife Party, Elite, and that song Passenger. But then I just wrote a bunch of others because there's also good. Digital Bath, Street Carp, I love.
Digital Bath is great.
I actually got a limited copy that came with Boys Republic, which I think is my favorite Deftones song ever, and it's not even like an official song.
I don't even know that song. I need to check that out.
Yeah, look it up.
It was a B-side to this album.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. It was a. Yep.
Where the hell have I been? I'm a Deftones fan. Shit.
Yeah. Find that stat. Find that ASCP.
Is it on B-sides and rarities?
No, it's not.
That's why I don't. Yeah, that's my bad.
I had a special edition copy of White Pony that had it as almost like a secret track, so that was cool.
No, I love Digital Bath is great. Change is obviously just an epic song.
Epic song.
And Back to School, the opener and the closer, it kind of comes full circle with the Back to School variation at the end.
Yeah.
It's a great record from front to back. You're right. There isn't really a bad song on there. It's just so good.
It's so good.
One of the things about, and Nate, you kind of alluded to this with like the picture the album paints. One of the things that Deftones, one of the many things I love about them is the album artwork, but two, it lends itself for the listener to draw their own conclusions. So I'll take like Incubus Morning View. The album cover is of a beach. Like it's intended to. The music is a soundtrack to the beach in my mind. But take Deftones, like the album, the artwork is very minimalistic. It's very minimal. It's just, hey, here's the outline of a horse or a pony. And that's all you get. And it's kind of a theme throughout a lot of their albums where, in the lyrics too, I mean, Chino never gets on interviews and talks about the meaning of songs. It's always intended to be very cryptic and vague and open-ended for you to paint your own canvas. I mean, you guys know me. Deftones is easily top 3 to 5 all-time bands for me, and this is up there. It's a top 10 album, realistically, for me. And even now, I listen to it when I walk the dog. I listen to it headphones at work. It's classic. It's timeless.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely timeless. And I think when you're alluding to the artwork, it seemed like it was another shift because their first 2 albums were also kind of simplistic, I guess, to an extent. At least Adrenaline was. But this one almost seemed like it was like a brand, like the White Pony thing. I sense maybe because they've used so much of these graphics for their merch. But it's like it became like, oh, this is like a brand. So it kind of alluded more, or it kind of added more baggage to the fact that like, oh, this is more commercial friendly. But it really is not. And to the point where the label actually made them similar to the Eminem album, Marshall Mathers. Before it came out, or even after it was released, actually, they put it out, and they weren't getting the success the label wanted commercially. That they had them re-record and put out a song, "Back to School," as like a single. So,
This is for me. This is Deftones in their final form, right? Like they're very heavy. They're very in your face for the first couple of records. This introduces melody, but it also has that heaviness and that edge. And they kind of are that way from here on out, right? Like they always incorporate heavy. They always incorporate melodic. They always incorporate sounds. They always, they're constantly kind of changing, but not at the same time. This is why this is the first album for me that like hits home for me. Like they're gonna be this, and they're gonna be this from different but the same from here on out. Which is, I mean, that's why I love them. Not that they're constantly putting out White Pony. They aren't. White Pony is probably their best album, just because it incorporates everything for the first time. But they have other albums that do some of that too, like even self-titled a couple of years later. And I love Koi no Yoikon. I love that one so much. There's just there's some great records in there that they do this well, but they did it here first, and that's why I love this one.
Yeah,
and you're right. This was the pivotal moment for them, because if you jumped from Around the Fur to self-titled or Saturday Night Wrist, it would have been a very interesting jump, and they probably would have lost a lot of people along the way. But I remember Change being on MTV. Like they got traction with this, and I'm surprised it didn't go more than single platinum in hindsight.
That's true. Yeah, good point.
No, that's true.
I mean, just go put Digital Bath or Change in Digital Bath, especially in the headphones tonight. When you're done listening to this, put your headphones on, drown everything else out, and put that song on. It's just so perfect.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Clutch to that era. Clutch still plays theaters. Deftones still plays like theaters. Slipknot came up around the time as same time as Deftones, but they're selling out like amphitheaters and stadiums and stuff like that. So Deftones is they've kind of remained like this. I don't know. I don't want to say cult following, because a lot of people know who Deftones are, but I think it's a cool, in between size band to be in. As a band member, I can imagine that must be pretty cool to have the versatility to be like, you know what, we're gonna do a tour off of White Pony and play theaters. All right, cool. We're gonna grab Incubus and Taproot and do the Back to School tour, and we'll play some arenas, I guess, on this run, and then we'll go back to playing theaters again. Like, to have that kind of flexibility must be cool, because I know as a band, like, playing theaters and stuff is, you get some obviously intimate shows and maybe even better sound.
Well, it's funny we bring up Radiohead and Deftones in the same episode, because a lot of people, they say Deftones is the Radiohead of metal, which you couldn't say that in 98, 99. It was like, this was the turning point for them. And they arguably play bigger venues now than they did years and years ago. Like, I mean, I saw them in 2007 at probably a 1,500 cap, and I think that was, again, one of those club tours, one of those small venue stuff. But I mean, even last year they played that Bank of America Pavilion in Boston, the outdoor venue. I don't know what that holds, but that's huge, right?
That's a good sized venue. Yeah. Yep. That's not a club, but not a gigantic outdoor amphitheater. So it's kind of in the middle, a couple probably 4,000 to 6,000 tops, but it's a big venue. Yeah. And you're right. This is very similar to the divergence that Radiohead had with Kid A. This is kind of not a divergence, but an evolving sound for them, where they go from being that kind of heavy. There's some melodic aspects, but this is a little more melodic and has some change in what they do. No pun intended.
Yeah, I think this album was a good crossover to anyone that was kind of interested in heavy music. I think we touched on this on an episode where it was like, that's not my style of music, but I appreciate it. To like, oh, do you like The Cure? Yeah. Do you like Metallica? Yeah. Check out Deftones. Oh, awesome. Yep. All right, cool. This album actually
makes sense. That's a good way
to
put it. Yep.
Like, it's a hybrid of different styles. Chino brings a lot of that 80s kind of, the Smiths, Cure kind of vibe to it, which, I mean, it's a really unique thing to throw into metal because Stefan's a straight up shredder. You know, he plays a 7 string with like Chino, and then you got Abe that's a really cool drummer with all sorts of different styles of music, jazz included. So yeah, they stand the test of time, but it's the kind of music that almost shouldn't work, but it works, and maybe caters to a smaller crowd, but definitely a diehard crowd. And yeah, in terms of memories too, like we were young, so high school, and I was just getting into this kind of like hard, heavy type of music, and it really just changed everything about how I approach and appreciate heavier music. It put me into a whole new wave of heavier music, and if it wasn't for Deftones, I don't know if I would appreciate it like I do today.
I think you're right. I think they did the same thing for me, Nate. I was like, this and Nails, Nine Inch Nails are probably the two bands that got me into some of the heavier stuff that I like now.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it, but I always was like at an arm's length, and now I'm a little more opening and a little more into it. So, yeah, this band is a band that could totally attribute that to. Because there's so many aspects. They're not just this one trick pony. Not to, white pony, one trick pony. They're not that. I know Chino was on recently with Zane Lowe, we're just waiting for him to come here because we would ask him legit nerd questions and not just when's the new album coming out. But he talked maybe a reissue because it's 20 years old and calling it Black Stallion, which is a pretty badass like change off of that. I would buy that record right now.
Well, the other thing, talking about genres, is this album allowed them to distance themselves from nu metal. So if you're a metal purist, nu metal's like the cookie cutter,
the rap rock, right?
Yeah, it's like the Pizza Hut of pizza. You know what I mean? It's accessible. It's watered down. The ingredients
stink.
That
for Mike? That was for Mike. Yeah.
Yeah. One of our friends really likes Pizza Hut.
Loves Pizza Hut.
So yeah, this allowed them to, because when you think nu metal, you think Limp Bizkit, right? Which is watered down. I mean, it's just some of the early albums are great, but then they kind of lost it. But this allowed them to shed that. And I know this album has elements of, there's some synth vibes, there's some shoegaze, there's melody, it's all over the place. And it was just a pivotal time for them in the genre. They escaped that nu metal.
Yeah, when people put them in when people put them in that nu metal category, I kind of balk at that. I'm like, I mean, maybe they came up around then, and there's some elements of it, but they're not a nu metal band, right?
Yeah. I mean, the first couple albums, there's some rap rocky stuff, but anyone that thinks that, they've clearly done themselves a disservice and dismissed them, and needs to check out some of the newer stuff.
Yep.
Or the last 20 years.
Yeah, there's so many good records from here to then.